I'd like to introduce you to someone. This gentleman is Mr. Peter Moore. He's the COO of EA, and in June 2012, he had an interview with IGN. He said, "You probably saw the video, EA in a nutshell. It portrays us as a money-grubbing monolith, gouging. You just want to say, really? We are the man?" Really? Before I get into this video, I actually want to reply to this rhetorical question with a list of ambiguous words that tend to evoke certain emotions from the gaming community. Words like Securom, Bullfrog, Day 1 DLC, Origin, Harry Potter computer games, SimCity, Spore. Actually, this is a little unfair and I'm pretty sure you could add to this list all day long. Completely bamboozles me why Mr. Moore would be taken aback that EA would be perceived as the man. It's not like EA is a massive publicly floated company, partly owned by banks and investment funds, that habitually and aggressively implements anti-consumer practices while simultaneously shoveling out cynically produced titles which primary raison d'etre is to make money at the expense of quality and end-user experience. That's just Activision, isn't it? The subject of EA has been discussed, debated and shouted about ad nauseum, and normally I just roll my eyes whenever I see another example of EA's signature escapades. But lately I've been motivated to finally do what I'm certain EA has been dreading since its founding. That's right, I'm making a YouTube video. So what was it that finally motivated me out of my YouTube slumber and come to the internets once again? Was this. The EA Humble Bundle. There are so many things about this that rub me up the wrong way. It would actually have to be a whole video in its own right. But basically, its success drives me crazy. It drives me crazy because it demonstrates that the gaming community has no spine, medium to long-term memory, or the principle to put its money where its mouth is. How many times have you shouted boycott, or I'll never buy from EA again? But what happens? EA hooks up some shiny stuff and all the crap they pull is forgotten, and you're back to filling up their bank accounts. There's a reason why the video EA in a nutshell resonated so well with the gaming community. Because it's an uncannily accurate depiction of EA, despite its artistic license, hyperbole and satirical nature. There's a reason why EA looks like a money-grubbing monolith. Because it is one. And there's a reason why they treat you like a little bitch. Because you are one. Right, now that we're all nice and angry, I think it would be a good time to start laying out to you in great detail all the dodgy things that EA has done, got up to and get away with. But there are a few things that I want to discuss first, and don't worry, we'll be laying into EA for all the wrong they've done. That will be right after I get to the quasi-capitalistic arguments and the consumerist worst company in America poll. Actually, let's discuss the consumerist poll first. So, are EA the worst company in America? Of course not. EA may be an immoral money-making machine, but they aren't money-making from people's deaths or ecological disasters or making thousands unnecessarily homeless or destroying the world economy. The world is full of immoral, evil organizations biting at the bit to exploit the misery of their fellow human beings, and America is home to a rather lot of them. So is the UK, in case anyone thinks I'm getting finger-pointy. Of the 32 companies in the 2013 playoffs, there are a handful of companies that gleefully add to the surplus of human misery, much more so than EA. PayPal, Wells Fargo, and Walmart are far more culpable for being damaging to society than EA is. Verizon and Ticketmaster rob you blind, whilst Microsoft, Facebook and Google hand over all your personal electronic information over to the UK, USA spy agencies. EA may be a money-grubbing monolith, but they keep their life-destroying, Magna Carta-defiling misery generation on the back burner and come nowhere close to the real rot and poison in our world. So let's move on. So I said something about quasi-capitalistic arguments. Whenever anyone raises concerns about EA's practices, they usually will be met with a handful of arguments, mostly geared around free market or corporate obligations. Of most of the arguments, they all can be boiled down to 2 or 3 basic counters, and they are as follows. Number 1, EA is a business, therefore its purpose is to make money. Point 2, EA has no obligation to the customer or the market. And point 3, EA need only answer to its shareholders. Point 2 and 3 are basically the opposite sides of the same coin, and all the points have some level of crossover. However, I will be discussing their unique qualities and not dwelling on where they have commonality. So, argument number 1. EA is a business, therefore its purpose is to make money. This particular subject is part of rather deep economic and philosophical theory, and so without wanting to spark a flame war between rival schools of capitalism and the broader spectrum of economic concepts, let's just highlight my 3 counter-arguments. Point number 1. Make games to make money versus make money to make games. Companies are not immoral machines. Number 3. Profit is not king. Right, so the first point, make games to make money versus make money to make games. There may not seem to be much of a distinction between the two things, but depending on which is the true goal of your organization, you will find that they will inevitably produce rather distinct results. One could make the argument that market forces would consistently choose the better games, therefore less better games would sell less, and therefore both models would produce the same result. In an idealistic world, it would, presuming that how good a game wasn't a highly subjective quality, and that all games have the same exposure and availability to the consumer, and that all competition was fair, free, and unfettered. In the real world, it's not the case. If you have a lot of money, you can massively increase your exposure, availability to reach the consumer, buy up competition, and even have enough money to spare to aggressively lobby and litigiously harass larger competition and even partners. In this environment, one only needs to do what is most efficient to produce revenue and profit. There are countless factories in China. A lot output cheap, nasty, sub-quality products. Yet they stay in business because people buy it. It doesn't matter what they do, as long as what they are doing makes them money. Once a business can effectively produce revenue, consistent profits, and can gain a position of market dominance, the environment can be manipulated in the favor of the respective business, and thus quality, or whatever is output, is solidly relegated to a secondary, or more realistically, a tertiary concern for the organization. We've at least established that market forces don't always favor quality of consumables for one reason or another. And I'm going to simply just state that a lot of what EA produces is sub-quality. Madden and FIFA are testaments to their reliance on shovelware. But let's look at the other side of the coin. We know that chasing money by flogging dodgy wares can be a lucrative model, and a lot of people will say, well, that's enough. That's all that one should expect from a business. Well, I suppose if cheap and nasty plastic from China is your thing, then it's your thing. But it isn't mine, and there used to be a time when making a game was the focus of games companies, rather than using games as a conduit to funnel money into your pockets. It's far from a secret that RPGs are one of my most favourite genre of game, and there was a golden period for this genre in the late 90s and early 2000s, with the Infinity engine and a little bit later with the Aurora engine. In fact, the RPG genre had to its name some of the best titles ever released, even before the advent of the Infinity engine. Why do games of this time hold such an esteemed position of so many gamers? It has a lot to do with the perceived quality of the games, and this can be generally distilled down to the developers caring about the games they were making. Why did the devs care? Because they were gamers too, and because they made games that they wanted to play themselves. Imagine that! Games by gamers for gamers. Sounds a lot more attractive than games by corporate coding departments for the maximization of quarterly profits, doesn't it? This particular section on making games versus making money is fundamentally important to my main argument that EA has a less than wholesome relationship with its customers. And I want to point something out. We all know that people can get very emotive about computer games, but do you know why they do? This wasn't a question I'd ever even asked myself to any degree of depth, but it was on watching one of Mr. B. Tung's videos arguing that the medium of computer games is an art form, in the same sense books, films, sculpture, poetry, paintings, etc. are, that I came to think a little bit more on this point. Actually, I would recommend that you take the time to visit Mr. B. Tung if you aren't familiar with him. His stuff is excellent, and he complains even more than me. Tell him I said hi, by the way. Anyway, when you understand games in the context of an art form, it is very understandable why it so easily sparks strong emotions from within the patrons of this art craft. That's why games that aren't cynically manufactured as part of a 5-year plan to expand market share in a respective demographic are so loved. Because on some level, deep down, we know the difference. We know when we are being shoveled swill to be downed face first from a trough, and when we're presented with well-crafted, painstakingly made masterpieces. I won't linger on this point any further. Suffice to say, declaring that making money is the prime motive of a business is not a defense of a business. It is an indictment. Point number 2. Companies aren't amoral machines. In our modern world, we have a lot of concepts that help us understand the things around us. The concept of a corporate entity is one of these. However, it is only a concept for the facilitation of regulation and taxation by governments. A company cannot have a morality because companies don't exist. Companies are only a concept. So if companies aren't real, then what are they? What they've always been. A bunch of people. People with morality and social obligations. It's farcical that you could hide behind a concept and declare this fictitious entity has no morality or obligations beyond making money for the sake of making money. Companies don't exist, and at the end of the day, it is people that make every decision in businesses. Human beings, not some faceless machine programmed solely for the improved efficiency of revenue generation. Companies are not machines. They are not dogs, as IGN bizarrely put it. They aren't even an entity. They are merely a banner to represent the activities of humans. At the end of the day, every decision, every action that a company makes is that of a person. And just a quick note, although companies are little more than a name for a group of people, they aren't a person in and of themselves. Corporate personhood is an insane concept, and little more than a manipulation of free speech rights. Point number 3. Profit is not king. This is the final section of my counter to the argument that companies exist solely to make money, and I thought I'd end it by covering the money itself. We've covered that companies aren't soulless machines and that when dealing with an art form, quality is appreciated where mass-produced dross is essentially an insult. But what about the money? Money is extremely important, isn't it? Well, yes. It is crucial to a business. Money makes the world go round. I would assume you don't work for many more reasons than to earn a wage. You need that money. Pay bills and buy food, clothes, obviously computer games. But like companies, money is a concept to simplify the exchange of another concept known as value. People go to work to basically provide things they need. In today's society, it is possible to do this by doing work that is completely unrelated to the basics such as food production, protection, supply of water, and shelter. This is achieved by the division of labours and the transmission of value, which can be exchanged for things of value. A society is generally enriched by employing this model, as it leads to the arisal of professions and as a consequence expertise, which means services and goods increase in quality and efficiency. Because of this, groups of people we call businesses will arise, where the intent of the individual is to create enough value to trade for necessities. The group's role is to produce goods or services to the wider population in exchange for transferable value. Money is important, but the purpose of a business is what it does for wider society, not its own money generation. That's why companies that have this dynamic in reverse are more often than not considered parasitic. At the end of the day, we are all social animals, and sociopathic behavior is not conducive to harmonious relationships. Making money is good. Making a profit, if you can, is admirable. But if your prime goal, at the expense of all else, including what it is that you do, is to earn that money, you become less of an asset to the rest of us and more of a liability. Points 2 and 3. Who does EA have an obligation to? So I rolled these 2 points into one section. Oftentimes the argument is presented that EA has no obligation to anyone except their shareholders. This is basically a fair point. EA does have a responsibility to explain their actions to those that have a financial stake in their organisation. But this argument can be boiled down again to the focus of the enterprise. Are you in the business of making games for money, or vice versa. If it turns out that money is the real goal of your organization, then those with a financial stake in its operations are going to be the priority over those that are the customers of the business. There's actually nothing intrinsically wrong with prioritizing the satisfaction of one group over the other. What gets annoying is when EA pretend otherwise. They have this consumer-first policy, which is evidently not true and even out-and-out exposed as fakery by those even inside the company. That's what irks so many members of our community. EA pretend to be something that they most clearly are not. A customer-focused artisan of excellent entertainment, rather than a money-grubbing monolith with bottom lines and shareholders as its core purpose of its existence. Either is something you are free to do. Just if you stop pretending, you may find a little less hate from the rest of us. This is not to say that you can't both make obscene amounts of money and high-quality, highly reputed products. Valve do rather well for themselves and command a great amount of respect from the community. Mojang make a lot of money for the size of their business and still keep a true customer-focused ethos. Kickstarter projects such as the Wasteland 2 project, Project Eternity, or Torment Tides of Numenera are real rays of light for the model of production that result in high-quality experiences. Although that is yet to be seen, they do look very promising. It is not that you're either a penniless artist or a money-grubbing monolith. Those that couch it in them terms are presenting a false dichotomy. You can have both money, community respect, and products of value. You may not have the absolute maximum profits it's possible to make, but if it's the difference between earning a living and adding to the wider society and earning a killing flooding the market with cheap tat, then there's only one route to avoid looking like a greedy fat cat. Hopefully the main points of this argument are clear enough. There is much more detail that can be expounded upon with regard to this subject, but this video is long enough, and quoting economic theory and social models would likely triple its size. Though, if there's enough demand, I will take the time to detail the specific concepts, models and theories from which I draw my arguments, to counter the overarching EA is a business, why should it care about anything else but money position. Right, so now that we've got the arguments out of the way, let's actually look at what is wrong with EA itself. There's a lot wrong with EA, and I'll only be focusing on their anti-consumer practices, as covering its anti-employee, anti-competition, and discrimination scandals would be too much to cover, and doesn't really neatly fit into my abuse paradigm between customer and provider. Even though the other factors are abusive in their own right. It'll muddy the waters of my example. We're talking why EA treats you like a little bitch, not its employees, competition, and the wider population. So let's lay into EA's anti-consumer practices, shall we? I've got 6 main aspects, which can be grouped into 2 main categories. Category 1 is money grubbing, and category 2 is control. I'm not really going to linger on any of these 6 aspects beyond highlighting them, giving an example and tying its negative impact to EA's general attitude towards their customers. Also, these 6 aspects are far from an exhaustive list of EA's anti-consumer practices, so you are free to shout at me for missing obvious or far more egregious examples. It would actually be very interesting to see what the community thought as a group were the most offensive practices. For the money grubbing group, we've got microtransactions, Day 1 DLC, and shovelware. And for control, we've got varying forms of DRM, such as software DRM, online pass DRM, and always online DRM. But let's talk about money grubbing. As we've already covered, there's nothing wrong with making money. We all need to do it. There's nothing wrong with making a profit, even an extreme amount of profit. In fact, if you can, it's generally something to feel proud about. This section has little to do with earning money from your work and more to do with squeezing every penny out of your customers via manipulative and cynical practices, microtransactions, also known as in-app purchases. The basic premise of this system is to enable the customer to purchase minor additional content for the game for a small amount of money. Things like extra weapons, or shinier weapons, or just more ammo. Let's listen for a minute to Mr. John Riccitiello, former CEO of EA.
The second thing, and this is a point that I think might be lost on many, is a big and substantial portion of digital revenues are microtransactions. When you are 6 hours into playing Battlefield and you run out of ammo in your clip and we ask you for $1 to reload, you're really not very price sensitive at that point in time. And for what it's worth, the cogs on the clip really low. And so essentially what ends up happening, and the reason the play first, pay later model works so nicely, is the consumer gets engaged in a property. They might spend 10, 20, 30, 50 hours on the game. And then when they're deep into the game, they're well invested in it. We're not gouging, but we're charging. And at that point in time, the commitment can be pretty high. As a personal anecdote, I spent about $5,000 calendar year to date on doing just this type of thing on our products. And others, I can readily attest to how well it works. But it's a great model, and I think it represents a substantially better future for the industry.
You'll notice the main drive is not to enhance the player experience, but rather to substantially enhance their digital revenues. This particular model is designed to deliberately withhold currently existing, developed, designed media with no other intent than to make money. This model has a lot that's similar with free-to-play, play-to-win games, which generally handicap non-paying players and constantly corral you into paying just to have an even chance at competing in the game. This cynical approach has nothing to do with games or the enjoyment of gamers, and everything to do with the sociopathic abuse of the market. My favourite line is, "It's not gouging, it's charging." Right after explaining his intent to leverage the player's engagement and emotional and time investment to extract just that little bit more money from them. I know euphemism and spin doctoring are tools of a lot of public or high-level figures, but in everyday interactions of interpersonal relationships, we call it sleaze, weasel words, my personal favourite, lies. Microtransactions are a negative force in the gaming world because they do worse than simply not add value to the experience. They deliberately take value away and withhold it until you can cough up just that little bit more cash for EA's pile. Day 1 DLC. A lot of the issues that are wrong with microtransactions are also the same with Day 1 DLC, that being withholding content from the player, content that has already been made and in a lot of cases has a bearing on the storyline of the game. There isn't anything actually wrong with DLC. In fact, in the good old days of gaming, DLC was called an expansion pack. It was designed to give something extra to the player, something new. For those of you who saw my Elder Scrolls Dumbing Down video, I'd like to point out that Bethesda have for the most part kept this ethic. Dawnguard, Hearthfire and Dragonborn were all wholly contained products in and of themselves, produced to accentuate and expand upon the already pre-established gaming experience. We can forgive Bethesda for their foray into micro DLC with their much derided horse armor. We can forgive them because they listened and they stopped it. So well done for listening. There's still hope, Mr. Howard. But why is Day 1 DLC so egregious and DLC released a few months later okay? It's not so much the timing of the release, though that is a factor, but the nature that Day 1 DLC generally has. Day 1 DLC is not so much accentuation of the game, but rather an additional charge to activate access to portions of the game that has been held back from the main purchase. A lot like selling a pack of cards for a $5 containing hearts, diamonds and spades, but no clubs or aces of any kind, then offering the customer the chance to get the rest in 2 lots of DLC, the super awesome clubs expansion DLC and the epic high-powered ace DLC. Obviously requiring the main game and clubs DLC. The game already exists. They are just chopping it up and selling it as additional content. Are we looking at customer first orientation here, or money grubbing gouging? Number 3, shovelware. We're all familiar with the practice of shovelware, even if we're not familiar with the term. Shovelware is everywhere. The best way to understand it is to see an example of it. I'm talking FIFA, Madden, Tiger Woods 2012, NASCAR, NBA Live, Need for Speed, NFL, NHL. Lots of sports games for some reason. There's nothing wrong with sports games though, or the people that play them. But EA certainly seems not to see them as much more than cash cows. How can I say that? Because from game to game there is no difference aside from uniform changes, lineup or roster changes, all important advertisement changes, but all of these changes are extremely surface, aesthetic changes that in no way come close to improving the underlying mechanics beneath the skin of these games. But why is that a bad thing? In and of itself, it isn't a bad thing, as in evil. But when taken in context of the wider behaviour of the people that control EA's actions, it widens the picture of a money-grubbing monolith gouging. The practice is all about quantity over quality, selling as much of a single product as possible by simply periodically reskinning it and selling it on as brand new. Again, it's another cynical and disingenuous example of EA's general attitude towards their customers, that they do little else but to shovel the swill into the troughs, and at 50 quid a gulp at that. Shovelware is an excellent example of EA's priorities. It isn't about an experience, it isn't even about their product. They are simply going through the motions of doing something that they know makes money, for no other reason than to make the money, not to produce something of value for the wider population. Money grubbing monolith, anyone? Control. The majority of this section is to break down EA's aggressive control of the customer experience of games they sell and to limit the freedom with which you can use the games controlled by them. We're talking DRM, and EA love their invasive, obtrusive, interfering, game-breaking DRM. How many of us have had to resort to pirating a game we bought just so that we can play the thing because the DRM crippled the one thing it was trying to protect? Well, in fact, DRM isn't designed to protect the game, it is designed to protect future revenue by forcing games to jump through hoops or pay up in order to play what's already been bought. I've mentioned SecuROM, online passes, and always online DRM, and initially my intent was to go through each of these one by one, detailing the cynical nature and the overarching bitch-treating liggery of EA. But there was a lot of overlap, and so I want to address why DRM is philosophically wrong. It's wrong, or moreover certainly feels wrong, because it is done wrong in general. Do you remember Spore? EA wishes you didn't. Hold on, I suppose I should be fair. That was all the way back in 2008. That's like 5 years or something. I'm pretty sure that all that DRM abuse is well in the past, and I'm definitely sure EA hasn't imposed always online DRM on any releases lately. Definitely not in this year, and they definitely didn't lie about it, and they certainly didn't get caught a few days later. Oh wait, my mistake. They did. SimCity 2013. For those of you not up to speed on this particular EA debacle, here's a little recap. SimCity came out and we were all told that one needed to play the game with an internet connection, even for single player mode. The reason EA gave was because the game was so complex and intricate that a huge bulk of processing needed to be done by very powerful supercomputers. EA very helpfully provided those supercomputers. However, it turned out, along with a whole host of other issues, that EA had lied to us all. The game could run without any internet connection as long as the game wasn't aware of this. It was a lie. Told to make their always-on DRM easier to swallow. Why lie if DRM is so good? Or not even an issue? EA lied because they know, we know, that DRM is an undesirable trait for games to have, yet they still try to slide it in under one guise or another. DRM isn't always a bad thing when it's done reasonably well. Steam is a fairly user-friendly DRM system that I personally use, though I do have my qualms with it. Ask yourself, what happens to your library of games on Steam when the service eventually closes at some point in the future? Near or distant. I've got a lot of games on there, and my suspicion is that when Steam goes, so do all the games I've paid for. Maybe. Maybe not. But uncertainty exists because DRM introduces an unwelcome question to the equation. Who really owns the copy of the game you just bought? In the olden times, once you bought a game, that copy was yours, to do with as you wanted. Play it, sell it, give it away, trade it, lend it, swap it, whatever. DRM introduces an element of ambiguity. You assume the game copy is yours, and you are certainly free to play it. Though what happens when the always-on DRM servers are down? Are you free to play it then? Do you own the copy? If so, are you free to sell it on, or transfer the rights to play the game to someone else? The world of DRM introduces a whole host of questions surrounding ownership rights and access rights, etc. These questions mainly remain unanswered or vaguely touched upon by those that espouse the technology. But the reason there are so many questions stems from the motive that give birth to DRM in the first place. DRM is not about protecting or enhancing the game for the user. It is motivated by the desire to secure future revenue. The Xbox One was a painfully wonderful example of a company taking DRM from its prime motive to the natural conclusion. Microsoft was seriously caught with their pants down red-handed in the cookie jar, and Sony masterfully exploited Microsoft's greed, much to the great enjoyment of our community, which forced Microsoft to embarrassingly back all the way down from their own money-grubbing schemes. Imagine if the future of gaming meant that to play a console game at a friend's house would involve a one-off activation fee, equivalent to 80 to 100% of the recommended retail price of the game. Hopefully, come Christmas, the consumer will make Mr. Microsoft feel the pain, right where it hurts, in his pocket. The Xbox One team's grotesque greed, when exposed, caused an uproar in the gaming community. When Xbone saw that they were facing the very real prospect of losing a large amount of future sales, particularly in the light of their main competitor having a hugely more appealing system, they scrambled to backtrack, deny, clarify, and explain what they really meant all along. There's a moral to this story. In fact, there's two morals. Because I like numbering things, I'm going to give you them in order. Moral number 1. Our voice can and will be heard, leading to change and our wishes respected. And moral number 2. The root of DRM is greed and control, and that's why people don't like it. You know, there's a business that I very much respect, and that's GOG.com, Good Old Games. All of their games are available DRM free, and if I have a choice of the Steam version or the GOG version, I buy the GOG version every time. Why do I support DRM free distribution of games? Because I know for certain that at any point in the future I will always have the ability to play my copy. That copy is my copy, and I will be able to play it with or without the continued existence of the distributor, publisher or developers. I support GOG with my money because I agree with their ethics. You want to know something else? I don't support EA with my money or in any other way because I don't like them. What they've done, do, and I'm certain will continue to do. They won't change anytime soon because they don't have incentive to do so. The focus of EA is to make money, and they do so by inducing you to part with it, and that's all they care about. Why does EA treat you like a little bitch? The same reasons banks, medical companies, insurance companies, media outlets treat you like a little bitch. Because you are one. Because they can. Because as much as they tell you that your business matters, that your problems are their main concern, they can get along well enough without you. And because their purpose for trading is to make money rather than their trade itself, you don't matter. However, as a group, we do. EA treats you like a little bitch because you keep coming back to them. You keep giving them money every time they've got another bauble to hawk to you. You know what you need to do? Stop it. Stop buying EA games. Don't buy a single one for as long as they stay on the course of the money-grubbing monolith. In the world where money talks, silence is horrifying. Remember the moral of our Xbox One story? Not just the loss of money can make a money-orientated company turn face. Simply the prospect of losing money can. Stop. Stop going back to EA and be the change you want to see in the rest of us. People that cry that boycotts don't work have never seen a boycott. Boycotts work because that's what hits any kind of business where it hurts. And to be honest, I don't even care about hurting EA. I don't like what they do, but they're free to do it. Just like I'm free not to buy any of their stuff. My main gripe with this whole EA issue is that people, the community, know and complain so much about how much they dislike this, that and the other that EA has done. But in a week or month or year's time, they are climbing over each other to buy the next title. The best way to stop being a bitch is to stop acting like one. Show us some spine. And, as you've already gathered by now, this doesn't only apply to EA. It applies to every single group of people on this planet. You can make a difference. We can make a difference. We know we can because we've done it before. Every time you give an abusive, corrosive entity your support in any way, you are taking a backhanded bitch slap to the face in thanks. Give them a reason to behave.